Hi, Erica. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you with us today.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so let's dive right in and learn all about what you're doing with your wellness journey. And I'd love to start with a backstory if we could do that. Maybe give us the story of what led you to working in wellness the way you are today.
Yeah. So, what's so funny is often what we're doing when we step into our passion work, we can find threads of it in like childhood somewhere.
Yes, yes.
And that is definitely the case for me. I always have been obsessed with health and wellness. As a very young kid, I wanted to be like a personal trainer, that sort of thing. And then we hit some bumps along the way. So that's kind of what my story has been. But um, I would say my wellness journey and really understanding from a holistic perspective, like started at age 14 when my love for health and fitness and that sort of thing became a way to cope with a dysfunctional home environment. And so I turned to more disordered patterns of eating and over exercising, exercise addiction to cope with what was going on. And while I did get into treatment pretty quickly, my mom saw what was going on and knew we needed help. So much of it was focused on the behaviors, on why it was I was afraid of food. That's a different thought I was. I was afraid of food, and just getting me to eat more food. And I was really like inside. I remember wanting someone to ask me, like, "But why are you in pain? Like, why is this?
Mhm.
You feel like a necessity to cope with pain?" And nobody was asking me that. So I did the things to get out of kind of danger zone from a physical perspective. But it wasn't until much later when I was 18 and I went to counseling on my own volition that I really started to get curious about what was going on beneath the layers of the eating disorder. And that kind of started my quest into psychology and understanding the impact of emotional trauma and how that, you know, impacts our health in all these really dynamic ways. And so when I then later I got my bachelor's in psychology and went off to grad school because I thought I wanted to be like a clinical counselor and moved away from home. And at that time, this is like my early 20s, I had more of a handle on like the disordered eating behaviors, but I started to notice a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. And I managed that by just over functioning for everybody around me and really overcommitted myself, had no boundaries, and was super codependent in relationships. And at the same time, like I said, super depressed, anxious, and not sleeping. I had insomnia really bad too for a long time. So that kind of led me into and I will say, kind of the way I didn't really have any tools. I realized and now see how all of the things that I've since learned about regulating your nervous system and kind of more like somatic healing practices to drop into your body and bring calm, I had no idea about at the time. So I did go back to counseling, and I tried psychiatric meds, and it all just made it worse. So I was like, that's not for me, but I didn't really know what to do. So I was just kind of making it through, surviving. And then I was 24, I got married to a man with he's six now. At the time he was three, son. And it wasn't but 3 months into our marriage where I hit a complete health crisis. I lost my job, I got in several car accidents, got a concussion, and then my digestive tract just like stopped. I could not eat food without severe pain. Um, and at that point, I realized like, okay, my body is like, stop, you've got to stop what you're doing. And there was so much like relational pressure coming into, because my husband's former wife was pretty much out of the picture as far as with her son. And so I really stepped into that mom role. And there was a lot of transition with that relationship too. That was super tough. So because growing up, I had really only had access to more of a Western medicine model approach to healing and got sent away. A lot of the times I was seen by doctors and they didn't know what was wrong with me. I'd have weird digestive symptoms actually all throughout like my teenage years. And doctors would be like, oh, she's fine. Nothing is wrong with her. I had massive hormonal imbalances. So they would just put me on birth control as a teen instead of looking deeper, all these things. And so, but in my 20s, when I hit that like rock bottom, I decided to go to a naturopath. And I remember being in my first appointment and, giving him all my complaints and all my problems. And I was really going to see him because of the really severe like digestive problems. And he listened. And then the first thing he said was like, do you have emotions that you are like refusing to look at, that you've buried deep, that you won't go into? And I was like, who do you think you are? Like, I'm here to get a supplement or a powder or something. And you want to know about this? But he started to explain the whole idea with like traditional Chinese medicine of like certain parts of our body being linked to certain emotions and how, I mean, I had the whole gamut. I had thyroid dysfunction. I had a parasite. We did a bunch of testing, really like severe hormonal imbalances, PCOS. And so, yes, I got the data, but I also realized like all of those things can correlate with some sort of emotional stagnation or energy in the body. And so, for instance, like with a thyroid, that really spoke to me having no boundaries, like in relationships, and just being the yes person all the time and not speaking my truth. Same thing with my job, because when I lost my job, kind of in the wake of all of that, although I was super disappointed, it's like I knew it was coming because it was so soul sucking and so out of alignment with what I knew I was supposed to be doing, like starting my business and all of that. And so it just doesn't surprise me that was kind of like, it just manifested. So then that set me on the trajectory to really explore deeper. I was so curious about like healing my whole person, and started a regular yoga practice, meditation. I love things like tapping and really just resourcing myself up to know when I start to feel kind of that activation of your fight or flight response system, what can I do in the moment to immediately kind of bring balance back in? And something I wish all kids learned in school, because that, like, if it's just a way of life, that makes it a little bit easier to learn, but it's so learnable too. And as I started to explore this idea of partnering with my body to heal, instead of seeing all these symptoms as like, my body's broken and I've got to fix it, and approaching it from the energy, but like, my body's trying to let me know that there are things in my life that are not working for its optimal thriving. And whether that's how I relate to people, the jobs I work, what I'm eating, my routine, like before bed with the insomnia, like, I wanted an easy fix, but the reality was I had horrible sleep hygiene. So it's like, once I actually addressed that and was willing to change my habits around that, sleep came a lot easier to me. So that process is kind of what led me to just kind of stir my passion to share it with other women, because it was a lot of piecing together for me. And I would have loved to have a place where I could kind of get that info right out of the gate and move from there. So that's what brings me to today.
I think it's so unfortunate that doctors will just turn women away when the thyroid, I have thyroid issues too that are under control now, but for many years, I knew my thyroid levels were off, and they would just say, oh, you're in the normal range, which is like this huge normal range, right? It's timely that we're talking now, because earlier this morning, I just had a visit to check in with my endocrinologist, and I have the best endocrinologist. I told her today that I want to interview her for the podcast, because she is really the women's doctor. She has never once just tried to throw medicine at me. We have always just had real conversations about what works. And we talk about nutrition, we talk about intermittent fasting, we talk about all different things. And it has really just kind of brought me to a better level of balance today, rather than just getting kind of turned away from a primary care doctor.
Absolutely.
So you also mentioned that you had a lot of pain, like gut pain, and just, from the time you were a teenager. And I think that this is a common theme that I'm seeing across women that I talk to, is that the universe kind of screams at us sometimes, right? When we are not listening. And I've begun to kind of write down these weird manifestations in the bodies of women that I'm hearing about. One woman like lost sight in her eye. And all of these things have these, deep meanings behind them when they're unexplained. I had really weird bladder pain and symptoms for a whole year. before I made a major change in my life and it went away. So many things happen that we just kind of brush off as woo-woo, or we think it's just some kind of a medical crisis when really it has a lot to do with emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I dug around on your website a little bit, of course, and I was looking at your mission. It says to build a friendship with your body that unlocks transformation in every area of your life. I love that. Can you talk about that mission and what that means to you, building a friendship with your body?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen in my own life, and it really towards the end of kind of my story, that process, that the body speaks to help us heal, not harm us. And so for a long time, I think maybe and a lot of women I've talked to as well are kind of afraid to go beneath the symptoms, when really that's like where your transformation is. Like if you follow the message, like it's kind of like your body gives you a phone call and you pick up and you hear from it, like it's going to lead you to your healing. And I think when you just work on the periphery, that's where you stay sick for a long time. And it can become, and I know for myself, it became almost this identity as far as like, I'm someone with chronic illness, because it's really like I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And even that perspective, I don't really see it as something was wrong with me, but I really wasn't living in a way that my body was designed to function in a lot of areas, not just physically, not just eating and that sort of thing. But so I think for me, this idea of how it unlocks transformation is I started to see that as I kind of stopped and slowed down to actually listen to what was going on beneath the symptoms, it would lead me to conversations or decisions that I never would have got to otherwise, because I mean, the body's kind of the first person who's gonna, the first thing that's gonna respond when something's off. And as I started to learn to listen to that, I was able to really change the way I showed up in relationships, really be able to, like I spoke to before, vocalize when things weren't working or were working or whatever, and what I needed. And as I started to do that, like I noticed more harmony in my body. Like sometimes it's as simple as being willing to say something that's hard, to have a conversation with a family member or a spouse. And then also I mean, I have really, as I've gotten further into the entrepreneurial space, I've realized how closely what you're doing for your work impacts your health too. And I mean, in my 20s, it's hard because you, when you're single, I mean, you're trying to make ends meet and you're trying to just like pay the bills. But I took a lot of jobs that weren't actually even, which I think is just kind of a crisis too, that for a lot of women, the working world does not accommodate or is not built around our natural rhythm as like in a female biology. And it was almost, I mean, I remember for so many years, it was almost impossible to have kind of the healthy daily practices and routines that I have now in that world, because it was so not conducive to that. So that was really eye-opening to me too, and kind of like taking a step of faith, because I don't even know that I could have reached my health goals had I not stepped out of that world. It would have been probably a lot more difficult. So yeah, that's another area that really becomes transformed when you step into this process.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned how work really impacts our health. And I never really I've thought about the world of work and different organizations, not necessarily designed for women, but I never really thought about it in terms of our rhythm. And I think you're exactly right that you have to step out of work that is not working for you, right, in order to transform your body. I worked for many years in education and higher ed specifically, and was doing a lot of teacher training and supervision and working in city schools at the same time. And ultimately, there wasn't any time in my day to get up an hour earlier and do a little bit of a gratitude journal or do a little reading or just sit with myself for a moment, which are all the things I do now to kind of start my day and create that rhythm and set the tone for the day. And I'm noticing that also with many women, that we all tend to start our days the same way now because we can do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I really saw that when I was still, before I lost my job and I was trying to navigate like my health crisis and process, and that it was very jarring to like the system for me to say, like, I need to be able to work from home some days because I don't know if I'm going to be able to, you know, be in a place where I can't run to the bathroom, and, you know, if I have to, like,
Yes. Yeah.
and I think that is part of why I probably lost the job, is because it was like, oh, this is just too, this is too foreign.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just think it's really interesting, but that was what I had to do to honor my body. And I'm so glad I did. Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
And really with our health journeys too, and what we're doing to feel our best, there really isn't one formula that fits everyone. So it's so
Mhm.
important that we don't just kind of read a blog and say, oh, this is what's working for her, this is what's going to work for me. And that you have to really, you know, do the work involved to figure out what's going to be best for you. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about your own coaching and how you help women kind of navigate that, finding that system or formula that works for them?
Yeah, which is what I love that you said it like that, because that is what I'm really passionate about. I don't know, in the health and wellness world, I feel like there's enough of like, this is what I eat in a day, and like, this is what you should be eating, because there are so many nuances. And as a woman, it changes. I mean, I'm pregnant now, and what I did a year ago, that's not even, you know, going to work for me now. And so
Mhm.
I really want women to access what optimal health feels like for them and what it looks like for them in their specific, you know, circumstance, if they have a family, their work, and then just their like individual, what works for you. Because even something like a, you know, a circadian routine, like not everyone wants to go to bed at night. Some people do stay up a little bit later, whatever. So
Mhm.
I think my goal is to help people tune into their bodies to get that information about what is going to be the right routine that feels really nourishing for them and their body, um, so that it's able to naturally heal itself and to thrive and feel their best, really. So,
Yeah, and the world we live in today is so full of toxins, stress, processed food. It's coming at us from every
mhm.
angle, and this wasn't the case many years ago,
Oh,
where
yeah.
stress was still there, but it didn't quite affect women the way it does now because we have so many other things working against us. Um, Let me jump over to a question that I ask everyone. What would you say has been your greatest challenge in getting you to the place where you are now in having helped yourself, but also helping other women?
Yeah, I think the greatest challenge was something I actually pointed to um, a little bit ago, was once I was on this trajectory of healing, getting lost in this like always healing kind of like loop of like, you know, because in some ways I realized I had to realize that oftentimes it's called like secondary gain in psychology. There's some sort of benefit actually to staying sick. And
Hmm.
often it's subconscious and you don't realize what it is. But I honestly think for me, it was an easier way to sit out of things I didn't want to be a part of or didn't want to have a conversation of like, oh, I can't go to that.
Yeah, I
I
can
don't want to do
relate to
that.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, no, I'm sick. I could use that as my reason for everything.
Hmm.
um, and that was keeping me stuck, because it's like, well, do I want to be sick so I have an out, or do I actually want to be better? But that means I have to then stand up for myself and I have to speak what's true. And it took a while to realize that that would be the better option for me, but acknowledging that I was kind of stuck in this, like, I'm always healing loop, um, and seeing myself as like chronically ill and managing symptoms and managing it to, I can actually move through this into the other side. And yes, that will mean I'm going to have to just say what I actually want, you know, instead of using being sick and not feeling good always as my reason and my way out. So that was really like, I had to get to that layer and be willing to like be honest with myself about that.
Very interesting. And you're making me see a little bit of a truth inside myself too. I think I have had experience with that as well. It's a little bit easier, right? It becomes comfortable too.
Mhm.
So, what advice would you have for a woman who is just kind of feeling off in general? Something's not right in her body. Maybe she's having digestive issues. Maybe she's having trouble sleeping, having migraines, kind of just feeling like work isn't where she's meant to be, but she doesn't really know what to do because she feels like she's stuck.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first and foremost is like, if you're feeling off, like trust that something is off. Like don't shove it down. Like don't say, oh, well, it's not that bad. Or maybe, I mean, for me, I know maybe everyone's this tired all the time. Like maybe everybody has stomach pain every time they eat. It's like it's so easy to think it's normal and that this is what everybody has. So I think like realizing our bodies were designed to thrive and to heal themselves, like, and understanding that any sort of symptom is a sign of communication, like your body has something it needs to talk with you about. And so first and foremost, I mean, I would probably pull out a journal and whatever time of day that works for you, kind of start to journal around the symptom, like, oh, so interesting. Like I'm feeling this stomach pain when I eat, or this anxiety every time I get home from work and start like the nighttime routine with my family or whatever. What is that? And just ask your body, like, what do you want me to know about this? And just practice sitting in that stillness and seeing what comes through and writing it down. I think just acknowledging it instead of shoving it aside is one of like the first most important steps that I would encourage people to do, and to trust that it is important. If your body's sharing something with you, it's vital information for you.
Yeah. Or, so many of us would have just gone and like eaten a donut instead.
Right. Yeah, totally.
So what would one expect when they work with you? Because you are coaching women now. Would there be a discovery call? How do you get to know the women that you're working with in order to find out what they need?
Yeah. So right now I have 2 coaching offerings. One is, I call it virtual hiking with a healer. So it's actually a day of messaging with me. It's kind of more, I don't know, quick and easier because you're just messaging over Voxer for a day. So that one is not going to have a discovery call, but I do have a questionnaire that people fill out before, so that I get a good idea of kind of what are we working with? Like, what is their goal? What are they trying, hoping to get out of this focus time of helping them figure out where to go next in their health and healing. And then as far as one-on-one coaching, which would be over Zoom, that I do have a 15-minute discovery call for folks to be able to make sure it's a good match and stuff prior. And then the same questionnaire too, to kind of understand what their goals are for our engagement.
I actually wrote that down, the hiking with a healer day. I love that. I love the title of that. That alone would suck me in. I was on your website and I went, whoa, wait a second. What is this? I just like, even if I didn't have something I wanted to talk about, I kind of would want to do that because it just sounds so cool. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So my last main question for you, are there any books or podcasts, things that you would, that have helped you along the way in any aspect of your own healing journey that you would recommend someone read?
Oh yeah. Where do we start? I'm such a nerd when it comes to this stuff. But when I saw that you were going to be asking that question, as far as really specific to women, one book that was really helpful for me that kind of puts together the mental health aspect and like physical dysfunction is Kelly Brogan's book, A Mind of Your Own. And she was a psychiatric, worked in as a in the psychiatric world mainstream for a while. And through her own like health journey, when she was diagnosed with something like a permanent illness and had to have a medication for the rest of her life, she started to wonder, is this the only way? Like, I actually don't want to do this. And so she shares her journey as well as how to find peace again and harmony in your body and in your mind without medication. And her protocol is super, super powerful. Her book is so informative. She includes a lot of research studies for people who are more skeptical of that approach. I'm like, can it really be done? She tells really compelling stories of people with pretty severe health conditions and mental health conditions that are able to recover just purely from using, nature. So I loved that book. It was so helpful for me. And then also The Fifth Vital Sign by Dr. Lisa, actually, she's not a doctor, but Lisa Hendrickson Jack. And that is all about like really empowering women to understand their bodies. I didn't read this till I was late 20s. And I was like, I didn't know anything about my body. Like what? It was helpful to just because I had a lot of hormonal imbalances, understanding what what the ideal picture for that is, and kind of understanding what maybe went awry when I was on birth control and how I could support my body coming off of that. Because I didn't realize that oftentimes a side effect can be severe gut dysfunction from hormonal birth control.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
So yeah, after struggling to get better for a year, I finally read that and was like, oh no, maybe I need to get off this, and that would change things. And it did really change things with my gut. So anyways, that book is so insightful and so empowering. I'm like, every young girl should read this. So
tell me the name of that one again. I'm just writing these down, and
it's called The Fifth Vital Sign. And it would be the menstrual cycle is like for women, their fifth vital sign, basically.
Very
a marker of health.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my final question is, where can we find you online if someone would love to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram pretty active at Wirth Wellness by Erika. And then I also have a website, wirthwellness.org. And then my podcast is also just Wirth Wellness, and that's wherever podcasts are heard.
Okay, well, it has been a pleasure to speak with you today and to get to know your story. I think in just 25 minutes, you gave us a wealth of knowledge. So I'm going to include your website and your Instagram in the show notes, and also in the description of the YouTube video as well.
Well, thank you so much, Carrie.
Thank you.